And here we are at the Laws of Growth event, and I'm struck by the fact that two key men in your life, your father and Kurt Kampmeyer, intentionally spoke into your life about personal growth. And I want these people who are watching around the world and that are here live to understand that you don't have to be big and a big shot. You don't have to be famous to influence somebody. And think of all the hundreds of thousands of people you've been able to affect. And both Kurt and your father, they get that reward. And so here's the question I think we all should be asking of you today. How do we find our personal Kurt Kampmeyers? Somebody who can really speak into our lives and change our trajectory.
Well, I can't take credit for it. I went to a seminar that Kurt was teaching on success. And when he finished teaching, I went up to him and introduced myself. And I asked for an appointment with him. And he came then to Lancaster to the Holiday Inn for breakfast, and we had that breakfast meeting that did change my life. And then I never saw him again from that time until my 65th birthday, when my staff I never had seen him. I talked about him and on my 65th birthday, when we were having a party together, they brought him into the room. And I hadn't seen him for 40 years. I just wept, and I thought, but I think the key was when I went to hear him, and he began to speak to my life about being successful, I kind of broke out of a barrier, and I went up to introduce myself, and then I asked, could I take him to breakfast and could I learn from him? And I think the key is once you see somebody that is helping you, be bold and ask them, can I take you to breakfast? And by the way, here's a thought, buy the breakfast, okay? Just don't go and say, hey, how about buying breakfast for me? But just, I took that step, and I've always been glad I took that step, and I've always thought to myself, you know what, if I wouldn't have taken the step, then I probably would have never had that relationship, or never maybe would have asked that question, never would have had this seminar, or would have written the book. So I think once you see somebody that you think can really help you, take the initiative and step right out.
I want to dive into one of the laws that I think hits me right in the chest like a 2 of 4, and that's the law of trade-offs. And I want to read this powerful passage from the book. The difference between where we are and where we want to be is created by the changes we are willing to make in our lives. And John, you and I are big sports fans, athletes. We just saw the Summer Olympics, and I don't know if anybody on the planet models this better, the law of the trade-offs, than these Olympic athletes who give up so much. Talk to us about growing up. At some point in our lives, we got to grow up and give up some things.
Well, Paul Harvey said that you can tell you're on the road to success because it's uphill all the way. And I'm here to tell you, this something-for-nothing entitlement mindset that invades so many people's lives is a bunch of garbage. I can promise you, nothing that I've ever had worthwhile did I have just kind of fall into my lap like, oh my goodness, I won the lottery. And I know once in a while people win the lottery, but basically the people that win the lottery, half of them lose their money within 3 years, the money they won, and it's because they got money, but they never changed the way they thought. And can I tell you something? If you have all the assets in the world, but you don't change the way you think, you'll lose all the assets in the world. And what I have discovered in this whole process of trade-offs is that every step of the way of my journey, I have to trade something off. And and for you that are young, the good news is your trade-offs will never be easier than when you're young. Because I remember when Mark and I started out, I think, man, I gave up everything. I was a pastor to go in the ministry. I gave up everything, and then I start smiling. And I thought, sure, I gave up everything. I didn't have anything to give up when I did. I was a kid. You know what I mean? I had a 1964 Ford Falcon and a U-Haul trailer and 5 pieces of furniture, and life was grand, and off we went. Here's what I've discovered, Ken, and I think that I want the audience and I want everybody watching around the world to know today, and this is very simple. The more successful you become, the higher the trade-offs are. You see, we make a mistake thinking it gets easier. It doesn't get easier, it gets harder. And the more you have, every time you go back and say, am I willing to risk that again? The more you realize, wow, I'm not sure I am willing to risk this. And what I've learned is the moment I stop making trade-offs is the moment that I plateau. And life is continually filled with trade-offs. In your life and in my life, my expression I use all the time, Ken, you've heard me say this, you have to give up to go up. That's an absolute fact. It's a great law. I've got it in the book. Obviously, I won't be teaching today since you asked the question, and we've discussed a little bit in this. But it's a very valuable law for people to grab hold of.
Yeah, and I think another valuable law that I grabbed onto is the law of curiosity.
Yes.
You know, I ask questions for a living, so some people are more curious than others. And I think you found that too. I know you're very curious. But you go through this in great detail in the book, in the chapter, The Law of Curiosity. We don't have time for you to unpack all of the different ways that we can develop it. But in short, John, how would you tell us to develop a habit of curiosity?
Well, you know what? People do look at me and see me as creative because I've written so many books, and I am curious. But when I started off in college, in my freshman psych class, they gave us a test for each student to take on creativity. And there were 17 in that class. I can remember it well. And I was at the bottom of the class on creativity. I mean, I was like number 17 out of 17. And what the teacher posted the scores, and so I saw how bad I was. And then I really felt bad, not only because I wasn't creative, but I was going to go pastor, I was going to go into ministry, I was going to teach, I was going to do sermons. And then I got to thinking to myself, I'm going to be another boring preacher. And, that just gripped me. I thought, this is going to be awful. I'm going to bore people all my life, you know what I mean? And then I'm going to ask them to pay while they hear me. This is an awful deal. So, and so 2 things I did. And I talk about it in the book. One is I started filing. I started taking thoughts and quotes. And the reason I started doing that is I thought, if I'm not going to be good at what I say, I need to quote somebody that is good. And so I started filing things that other people would say. So I'd go around and I'd say, well, Ken said, you know what I mean? And Joe said, and Susie said. And so that at least I would be a little bit more interested. And that's how it started. But the big breakthrough I had was, and this will help everyone. How many of you would like to be more creative? Let me see your hands, okay? How many of you would like to just absolutely have an imagination that just took you to a new level? You know what I'm saying? Okay. How many of you already have that because you're on drugs? Okay. Well, here's the key. This will work for you. I promise it'll work for you because it worked for me. I made a major change in my early 30s from just having answers and being a leader that just had to cast vision, show everybody what I was doing and where we were going. And I started asking intentional questions. And I became a person, I ask questions all the time. Every day, I ask questions. And I have found just asking questions will take you on exciting journeys more than anything else. You excel in that, Ken. I've watched you over the years. You'd excel really in that. But for my early years, I didn't ask enough questions, and so therefore, I didn't get enough ideas and thoughts from others. So when people say, I want to be more creative, what's step one? Step number 1 is ask more questions. Just go to people and start asking questions. It's amazing what you'll learn.
Boy, it's so true. We're going to take a few questions, John, that we got online from our viewers. The first one is from Joe Iliff in Texas. And Joe asked this question of you, John. How important is it that I grow with others, or is it okay if I just grow alone?
Well, Joe, great question. And being from Texas, you probably want to grow alone. I know how you Texans are. But I can tell you, Joe, for a fact, it's better to grow with others. It's more fun to grow with others because once you find other growing friends, you kind of take energy from each other. Doesn't that make sense? And secondly, you learn more. Ken, if I grow by myself, I'll learn what I can learn because of my perspective of what I read and what I hear. But if I grow with you and you and I get together on a weekly basis or a couple times a month, and we're eating lunch and we're sharing with what we're reading and we're sharing with each other, I'm not only going to get what I know, but I'm going to get what you know. And guess what? I'm now doubling my growth potential. And so I learned a long time ago, none of us is as smart as all of us. And some of my best thinking has been done by others. In fact, if you don't believe that, just read it in my books. You'll find I just quote people out the gazoo, don't I? And by the way, you give me an idea. Remember when I wrote the book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect? And we blogged that book, and we got 100,000 people giving us input on the book, and we just changed every chapter because their ideas were better than mine. And I would put their name in it and give it credit. We put their picture in the book, and it was fun. And so I learned not only some of my best thinking has been done by others, but I also is that none of us is as smart as all of us. And so Joe in Texas, my friend, grow with others. You'll grow faster, you'll grow better, you'll get a much more wise perspective of growth in life if you grow with someone else.